Hello, thanks very much for watching this recording of an introduction to student finance from myself, John, and my colleague Paul. We both work here at the Lifelong Learning Centre, where we support adults who haven't been to university before find out about their education options and potential next steps. But today we're going to talk about student finance. Particularly, the figures we're going to speak about are going to be for academic year 24-25. So it'd be particularly for students starting in September 2024. But we will be going over how student finance works, what you may be entitled to, extra additional support that you may be able to get as well. And as I said, I'm joined by my colleague Paul.
Yeah, John, I think that was important to note there that this is an introduction for people that haven't been to university before.
Yeah.
Quite often we get questions from people that are maybe thinking about doing further study and postgraduate study, or that have been to university before. And it's very much a session for people that know nothing about student finance, and that's absolutely fine. That's what we're here to hopefully give people a sense of how everything works, and hopefully by the end of this session we'll have maybe dispelled some myths and maybe made you realize that actually it's not as complicated as perhaps you think that it might be.
No, totally. And another thing, just to kind of let you know about as well, is that we are here to support as well. So if you are, applying for the University of Leeds, if you're applying for a lifelong learning centre course, if you need support for student finance, you have any questions at all, you're really, really welcome to get in contact with us. The contact details, hopefully you can see on the screen now, lifelonglearning@leeds.ac.uk. We're not expecting you to watch this video and just, have all the knowledge that you need. Things often crop up, questions may come into your head as you go along, and you're really welcome to get in touch with us and ask us any questions, and we're really happy to support. So this is the part usually when we actually do the session live, where we say, if anybody has any questions, pop them in the chat or put your microphone on. And as I said, I would just, advise if anybody has any particular questions after the session, do get in contact with us at lifelonglearning@leeds.ac.uk. We also have a free impartial advice and guidance service as well, which we can talk about a little bit at the end as well, which is a great option and opportunity to talk not just about student finance, but also about your education options more broadly, what you can study, maybe the qualifications you have, or maybe qualifications you need to get to study that degree course you want to study. But as I said, we'll mention that at the end. So the session itself is broadly broken down to kind of four key areas. What is it going to cost to go to university? Are we going to pay for it? How much could you get? What could you be entitled to? And then finally, where to start? So just to begin at the end at number 4, if you were looking at applying for student finance to start a course in September 2024, I would suggest you get your application in as soon as you possibly can. It's really important that you get it in as early as possible because, and this is a crucial thing to know, irrespective of when you're applying, you don't need the cash up front to pay for your you don't need an offer of a place at university. You don't even need to have studied to have submitted a UCAS application or a part-time application. You simply put down the course you hope to study in the university you hope to go to, and you can then submit your student finance application. And if things change, you just update it. But it's good to do it as early as you possibly can. It's really, really important because student finance can often take a little bit of time to process your application. I think, is it about 30 working days, Paul, on average?
Yeah, well, I mean, they say 6 to 8 weeks. I always get asked the question from students, what's the deadline? What's the latest I can apply to Student Finance England? And I try to tell them that that's the wrong question. The question is, what is the earliest I can apply? And you're right, people psychologically think, well, I don't want to commit myself. This feels quite serious. This feels it's a government kind of form. It's student loans. I don't want to commit myself until I know I'm definitely going to university. And you're absolutely not committing yourself. You're applying for student finance on this. If I hypothetically go to university in September, how much might I get? Will I get student finance? And the government will just assess your application and go, yeah, if you go to university, this is what you can expect. But the students that maybe leave it and leave it and they're waiting to find out whether they've got an offer, actually, because it takes 6 to 8 weeks to process a student finance application. And then what if they need some additional information? Wow, if people are leaving that into August, September, I'm not saying it's impossible to then have the student finance in place for the start of your studies, but it just leaves you with a mountain to climb, and could leave you without money at the start of your course. Apply early.
And we will keep saying that as we go along, apply as early as you can. Now, I understand that some people may be watching this and thinking, well, actually, I'm going to be applying for September 2025, or even, maybe later than that. Generally, student finance opens in around about early spring for applications. But when it opens, we will do lots more sessions around student finance to talk about it. So do keep an eye out for that as well. So we started by, what does it cost to go to university? Well, when you're looking and you're doing your research about different courses that you could study, often the first thing you may see are those course fees per year, tuition fees. They can vary from university to university, and they can vary depending on your mode of study. So if you're looking at a part-time course or a full-time course, they can vary in the amount. But I think the key thing to know is that you are not expected to have the cash up front to pay for your university fees. As long as you're personally eligible for a tuition fee loan, you'll be able to get that from the government. We'll speak a little bit more in detail about the loans you're able to get from the government as we go along. And that goes automatically from Student Finance England to the university you're studying at every year of your studies. So you're not expected to have that cash. You're not expected to organise a payment plan or put down, a down payment, or even have the money drop into your bank account and have to sort out passing it over to the university you're studying at. It just happens in the background when you register as a student on the course that you're going to be studying. Now, the next things are around study costs and money to live on as well. And they're going to vary from person to person and course to course as well. Now, study costs can be lots of additional things that are sometimes in addition to your tuition fees, and sometimes just general kind of things which are just worth bearing in mind as well. So, for example, if you're studying a healthcare course like nursing or midwifery, you might be going on placements up and down the town or city you're going to be studying in. Obviously, if you're traveling more than you usually would, that might have an additional cost. But equally, if you are going to be going on field trips for scientific courses, perhaps, or need lab coats and equipment like that, that might have an additional cost. A lot of universities and a lot of courses now will send you some information or have it available on their web pages of additional costs related to that degree course. And again, this is not designed, just to kind of let you know that there can be some additional costs, but often there's money that you might be able to use to pay for those things as well. Same if you have children, and particularly perhaps preschool children, and now you're going to need to find some nursery or childcare for them, or maybe even an after school club as well if you're going to be in lectures in the afternoon. And if you have a disability and additional support needs to be put in place for your studies, where does the cost come for that, or what is the cost, the money to pay for it, should I say? So particularly for childcare and arrangements and disability, there's actually additional support you can get from Student Finance England, which we'll cover in a little bit. And then there's money to live on as well, which can vary on person to person. It depends on your lifestyle, your rent, if you're paying a mortgage, if you're going to be driving. The big thing to know, though, is that student finance just don't take these things into consideration when they're determining how much you'll get in your student loan. Take other things into consideration, but not these. So you need to make sure that the money you get lasts you, I would say. Because I think this is a big point, isn't it, Paul? Often, sometimes for younger learners, but obviously with adults as well, you've often got so many other things going on in your life. Knowing what you're going to be getting with regards to student finance and then budgeting can kind of help alleviate any kind of pressure financially to work out what you're going to be doing as you study.
Yeah, in my student support role, I get asked questions all of the time, particularly around rent and mortgage. Will I have a mortgage? Will the government pay my mortgage separately and then give me money to live on? I get questions from people when they start university. They'll book in to see me and let me know. I don't know that they're traveling from Huddersfield on the train every day, so they want to find out about the the travel fund to help them with the train costs, and they're really surprised when I let them know that there isn't a travel cost. I mean, the money, you're right, the money that student finance are giving you is there to maybe cover all of these things. We'll touch a little bit later on in the session, maybe about any extra pots of money that there might be to cover things like travel and books and stationery and IT. And we'll talk a little bit later on in the session about the things that are taken into account. So when your student finance is, when they are calculating how much money you are going to get, we'll talk a little bit about what they are taking into account. But I think you're right, John, and to hammer home that point again, where people may be watching thinking, well, how much will I get? How will I know if I'm going to be able to afford my mortgage or rent a car? Or you're applying to student finance really early, and by applying really early, they're going to assess how much you're going to get, and they're going to tell you this is how much you've got to live on, and you'll go, ah, okay, that makes sense. Now I know that I can get the train from Huddersfield, or I can afford X, Y, and Z. Apply early.
Yeah, we can't say that enough. Apply as early as possible to make sure you know exactly what you're going to be getting when you start your course. So, we've looked up what it costs to go to university. I guess the next part is how will you pay for it? Well, the vast majority of people are going to get a loan from the government via student finance to cover their tuition fee loan, which you just spoke about, and also a living costs loan, also called a maintenance loan. Your tuition fee loan, as long as you're eligible, you get the full amount for the duration of your studies. For your living costs loan, everybody who's eligible gets a minimum, and then to get above that minimum up to the maximum you may be entitled to, you need to provide evidence of your household income. And we'll cover a little bit, well, we'll cover it in quite a bit of detail, actually, what that means later on as we go along. Now, you are eligible for a tuition fee loan for full-time and part-time courses, and a living cost loan, maintenance loan for pretty much all full-time courses, and the majority of part-time courses as well, with only a couple of exceptions really these days. And I think the next thing is really important to know as well, because it's a part that often people get very worried and very concerned about, and it's totally understandable. It's what happens when I finish my studies, what happens when I graduate, what happens to that loan that I've taken out. And it's important to have the facts, I think, about this, because this is a bit that people can often get quite wrong. So firstly, okay, it is repayable with interest, but only when you earn a set amount. And for people starting university this September, that set amount is £25,000 per year. So that threshold is set at £25,000. And you only start paying it back when you earn above that amount. So you earn 9%, so it's 9% on what you earn above that £25,000 threshold. So to put it into context, if you were to earn £26,000 a year when you finish your studies, you would pay roughly around about £90 a year back on your student loan, spread over 12, monthly installments. It automatically comes out of your wages, unless you're self-employed. After 40 years, it's any remaining debt is wiped. Goodness me, 40 years is a long time, but not many loans would do that. Inverted commas, and I'll come on to what I mean about that in a second. It doesn't pass on to family members should anything happen to you. And it doesn't negatively impact a credit file or a credit score by just having a student loan. It shows an outgoing, but so will your utility bills. And the reason I said it's a loan, inverted commas, is because it doesn't work like any other loan that you're actually going to take out. It's actually a tax for going to university. It's probably never going to be called a tax for lots of different reasons, but that's essentially what it is. It's a tax for going to university, and you start paying back that tax when you earn above £25,000 per year. If you earn less than that when you finish your studies, But however long that is, you will not pay anything back on your student loan. And it's set 9% on what you earn above that £25,000 per year. And we will get students at the Lifelong Learning Centre of all different ages and all different backgrounds studying. So we'll have students in their late teens and 20s right up until their late 70s. And for some students, for lots of different reasons, they may not earn above that £25,000 per year when they finish their studies. And if they don't, they simply won't pay anything back on their student loan. I think it's really, really important to have that information because, as we were saying, Paul, I think a lot of people do get quite concerned about this side of it.
When we do this session, either in person or online with an audience, at this point, I usually maybe pick on one or two people in the audience, particularly those who work. And I ask them to think about just over maybe 12 months how much they pay in tax or national insurance. And 9 times out of 10, you get them scratching their head going, I'm not sure. And we flag it up. We go, wait, you don't know how much tax or national insurance you're paying every year, and why might that be? Listen, I don't. If you asked me the question now, in the last 12 months, how much have I paid in tax? I've got no idea. I've got a rough idea. I mean, when I get paid, I look at my pay slip and I see that they've deducted tax and national insurance, and I understand, that if I haven't got a job, I'm not going to be paying tax and national insurance, and know that I don't pay tax on the first X amount of thousands that I earn, and know that the more that I earn, the more tax and national insurance I pay. I'll be paying it maybe for the rest of my working life. I'm not having to walk into a bank to pay it. It just comes off the pay slip. So just sleep a little bit easy. I mean, I wished I wasn't paying as much tax and national insurance. But I just know that occasionally I might look at my pay slip and something's gone wrong and I need to figure that out. But my tax just takes care of itself. As I say, I'm not lying awake at night worrying about, oh my God, how am I going to pay off all of this tax? And you're right. The student loan is exactly the same. I haven't been to university, so I don't pay this tax. You're going to university, and when you finish, you just start paying this tax. Only when you earn a certain amount, the more that you earn, the more you pay back. They take it straight off your pay slip. You will just have an extra line on your pay slip: income tax, national insurance, pension, student loan. If you lose your job, you'll stop paying your student loan. It just works like a tax. You're absolutely right. And when we think about it that way, we feel not only a little bit more confident about student finance, but I think we feel a little bit more confident about university, because one of the things that puts us off about university or even going is like, oh my God, the debt, all of the tens of £1,000s worth of debt. We wouldn't think that about getting a job. I'm not going to get a job because I'll have to pay all of that tax. If we think about it in the same way as just work, then and a tax for working there, then we can't go wrong.
Yeah, totally agree with what Paul was just saying. And we often signpost people to Martin Lewis's website, Money Saving Expert. He's wrote some good articles about student loan myth busting and really breaking it down, this idea that actually it's a tax for going to university, and they're always worth having a look over and having a read of as well, I would say. But as Paul said, it is a tax for going to university, and really important to have those facts to decide, what you want to do for yourself, for your next steps. I think the reason we kind of speak about it so much as well is that fear of unmanageable debt, being saddled with unmanageable debt, shouldn't put anybody off from university without really kind of realizing how it actually works. Just to mention as well, when you do get your living cost loan, you're going to get it in 3 installments as well. So you get your first installment in when you start your course, really, that's September, maybe early October time, depending when you're registering on your program. You get your next one after Christmas time, so the start of semester 2, about January time, and you get your final one, I think is about March, April time. You'll be able to get that one as well in your final semester. So you'll get those 3 installments for every year of your studies as well that you're eligible for. So The next few slides, we're going to look at different pots of money and financial support different people may be eligible for, depending on your personal circumstances and sometimes the course you study as well. But the one thing that kind of unites everything we speak about from now on is that whatever you're eligible for, you don't have to pay back. So it's called a non-repayable grant or bursary, and they're for lots of different reasons. And we'll start with the ones that you can get from the government, from Student Finance England, and they offer additional support on top of your loan for your student maintenance loan for disability support and support for dependents. So disability support is also known as the Disabled Students Allowance, is not means tested. So whatever you are eligible for, you'll get the full amount. Whatever you get, you don't have to pay it back. And it's for support, which is linked to study costs for the program you're studying on. And whatever support that is, it's paid directly to whoever's providing that support. And it can be in a lot of different areas that you can get that support from, things like long-term health conditions, mental health conditions, learning differences like dyslexia, dyspraxia, for example, and whatever would need to be put in place for that support. I would really recommend and suggest that anybody who thinks that might be suitable for them, they apply for that alongside their student finance as well, because we do find, don't we, sometimes, Paul, that actually, well, definitely, as we've been saying, applying early as possible and applying for things like the additional support means that you've got more chance of them being put in place for you when you start your course.
Listen, it's particularly for older students, but all students, they make, I think, the mistake of thinking, well, look, well, they think that if they tell the university that they have a disability or medical condition, that it might count against them. It wouldn't. Universities in particular are really good at putting support in place for students with long-term health and things like that. But I think more importantly, they think, well, I'll start university, I'll see how it goes, and then if I need any help and support, then I'll ask for it. But actually, universities are big, complex machines, and the earlier we know that someone might need support, the better it is. And you know, if you're waiting until you start university, then telling us a few weeks in, oh, we might just struggle to put that support in place. So having that early conversation, I think, with the university lets the university put the support in place. That doesn't cost anything. So I don't know, if we have a student that has dyslexia, we can quite easily put in extra time in exams, for example. Let's get that locked in before you start. This process of disabled students allowances that you're applying for with Student Finance England, it's part of the same application. You're not having to apply for a tuition fee, a maintenance loan, disability support all separately. It's all one application where they're asking the question, do you have a disability? That just locks in, you know, if there's any support that costs money. So extra time in exams doesn't cost anything, but what if that dyslexic student needs specialist software or a dyslexia tutor? It'll pay for that. People might be thinking, well, I don't kind of know what support I'll need because I haven't started yet. Fine, just apply for it anyway, lock that support in place so it's there, and then as you start your university journey, the funding can then be drawn down really easily. Yeah, absolutely.
And the next thing on the slide that you can hopefully see is support for dependents. So this is children or adults who are dependent on you. And this is means tested. But whatever you're eligible for, you don't have to pay back. When we talk about means tested, we're talking about whether your household income is used to determine A, if you're eligible for something, and if you are, B, how much would you get. So they do take that into consideration to determine if you're eligible for this. But whatever you may be eligible for, you do not have to pay back. Now, the big thing that's different from the support for dependents compared to everything else we've already spoken about, including the disability support, your tuition fee loan, and also your living cost loan, is that this is for full-time students only. So for part-time programs that you are applying for at university, unfortunately, the support for dependents is not something you can apply for. It's only for full-time courses. As I said, everything else is available for part-time and full-time students. Your maintenance loan will be prorated on the amount of study you're doing, for example, for a part-time course compared to a full-time course, but for the majority of programs, you're still eligible for it. So for the support for dependents, there is something called the parental learning allowance, which is could be up to a maximum of about £1,900 a year for students starting in September 2024. It's not a guarantee of £1,900. That's up to £1,900, depending on your household income essentially, and that's a set amount if you have one or more children. You don't get more if you have more than one child. There's also something called an additional childcare grant. So if you cast your mind back to one of the first couple of slides where I said, what would you do, with regards to, if you've got children, you're going to have to find childcare for them. That has a cost. Well, this could be used to pay for up to 85% of childcare costs. It's paid to whoever's providing that support or care, should I say, and they have to be Ofsted registered as well. So you're really looking at things like a nursery, a creche, Ofsted registered childminder, or an after school club. But that could be used to pay for that. And again, it's up to 85% of childcare costs. So it's not a guaranteed you'll get that 85%. That's a maximum that you can get. There's also something called the Adult Dependence Grant as well. So this is for any adults who are financially dependent on you. Again, full-time students could get up to about £3,500 per year, roughly, if you were starting in September 2024. I keep saying that because figures will change for students who are starting in September 2025 and onwards. And I would just say, do kind of, keep, familiar with our website, the Lifelong Learning Centre's website, and in probably early 2025, we'll start doing these sessions live again, which you're welcome to come along to, and we'll have much more up-to-date information for future years. But yeah, they are just for full-time students only.
Can
So the
I
next,
just chip? Can I just chip in there with
please do, yeah, please do.
just with a note of caution there around the childcare grant? Again, when I'm speaking with student parents, I think they make an assumption because I have children, I will get a childcare grant, and the word means tested. He is doing a lot of work there, and there isn't a guarantee. A lot of our students absolutely do qualify for the childcare grant, but there is kind of a household income assessment and things like that, and that stuff's quite important. Will my children be able to go into childcare? How will you know that you're eligible for the childcare grant or how much you'll get? We've said it about a million times already. You're applying to student finance early, and they're going to tell you whether you're eligible for the childcare grant, and then you can start planning nurseries, after school clubs, and you'll know exactly what you're eligible for. But yeah, don't make the assumption, well, I've got kids, I'm going to get the childcare grant. You may well, but yeah, apply early. Sorry, John.
No, not at all. It's really important, I think, to kind of keep kind of getting that message across about applying as early as you can. And for all of these things, if you think you're eligible for them as well, when you're doing your student finance application, I mean, it's not the longest application. It's about 30 minutes to an hour, probably filling it in. It will ask you, do you support dependents? Are they children or are they adults? And if you say yes, it'll take you through to that part of the form. Same with the disability support. Do you have a disability? If you say yes, it will take you through to that part of the form. I would strongly suggest just getting these parts filled in as you do your application if you think that they would be relevant to you. So the next area, we're going to move away from financial support from Student Finance England and really look at different areas of financial support or different pots of money that you may be able to get depending on your personal circumstances, what you're studying, and sometimes where you're studying as well. Now, this is a bit, Paul, isn't it, where we would often ask people if they have contacted the universities they're interested in studying at, as to whether there is any additional financial support that they could be eligible for, that they don't have to pay back. And often this is where you kind of, would you agree, Paul? It's often quite quiet. People don't tend to know this actually exists.
Yeah, this idea that most universities have pots of money that they just give to students, free money. I mean, we use the terminology a little bit differently: grants, bursaries, scholarship but most universities have them. Here at Leeds, we have something called Leeds Bursary that, depending on whether you're part-time or full-time, I mean, it can be worth up to £3,000 cash. Um, Based on household income. I don't know, another university might have X amount of thousands of pounds for if you're the first in your family to go to university. Somewhere in Manchester might have a pot of money based on academic achievement. Some of them you might have to apply to, some of them you might be automatically assessed for. But people are always really surprised when they find out that most universities have pots of money that are available for different purposes, but most of the time students are using them just to pay for whatever they want, really. And that can be
Mm.
the difference between, well, particularly in a cost of living crisis. I mean, that can be the difference between a student being able to come to university or not, or particularly with our older students, that we tend to find we find with a lot of our 18-year-old students, they may be coming to university from different parts of the country, and they may be living away from home for the first time. Not all, uh, but we find with our mature students, the older students, they've got families and homes and commitments. They're not applying to universities all over the country. They're pretty much staying within the local area: Leeds, Bradford, Huddersfield, maybe Sheffield. Um, so these bursaries can be the difference between a student choosing one university over the other. I wasn't thinking about coming to University of Leeds because I would have to get the train from Huddersfield every day, but I'm not sure I could afford that. That conversation maybe changes when maybe University of Leeds are saying, but we have this bursary worth up to X amount of thousands of pounds. Can really make the difference for people. Or it could be the laptop that helps you study. It can be the stationery, the books, those additional course costs that you mentioned at the beginning that maybe aren't covered by that student loan that you're getting from the government. Actually, that additional pot of money might just help with some of those things.
Totally. And I think, that is the key message that we want to get across about this, is that firstly, there is a lot of money out there that you can get for lots of different reasons. It's not just linked to Leeds University or the Lifelong Learning Centre. There's lots of different financial support and pots of money, at other universities as well, whether that be locally, as Paul was saying, Leeds Beckett, Bradford, Huddersfield, or whether it be further afield, Manchester, universities in London, the Midlands, etc. The best thing to do, and the main kind of advice I think Paul and I will give for anybody wanting to find out about these pots of money and financial support that you could get, is do some research. It won't take you long to kind of type in fees and funding for X universities, have a look at their pages, see what's available. If you can't find the information you need, send a nice email to them, and they will get back to you to let you know. But there is financial support available in the guise of grants and bursaries that you don't have to pay back. And as Paul was saying as well, that can be for a variety of different reasons. It can be first in family to go to university. Could be based on the information you provide to student finance. It could be the course you're doing or the postcode of your permanent address. Lots of different reasons. But the worst thing to do would be to not do your research, and maybe it was something you had to apply separately for. Go to university, start in September, and say, what can I get financially? And they say, well, you could have had this and you could have had that, but unfortunately, applications are closed. So research, have a look about how you need to apply. Some will automatically enroll you, but don't just take that as a given, because we are talking about thousands of pounds here. And as Paul was saying, it can make the difference between, I think, in the current climate, not just maybe even what university you go to, but for some people, whether you actually go to university or not as well. So do your research and see what you can find out. There are often scholarships from universities as well. Scholarships are a little bit different to bursaries because often that's where they will pay for your fees, maybe for the duration of your studies. Again, scholarships can be for lots of different reasons as well, but research to find out about your eligibility and what you might be able to get as well. That's the key word, I think, there, research. And there's nothing wrong with applying for a grant or a bursary from a university. If you don't end up going to that university, you simply won't get that money. But as I said, better to apply and not need it than not apply and find out you could have had it, I would say. So again, continuing the theme of additional support that you don't have to pay back, there's something called the Learning Support Fund, which is administered by the NHS. And this is financial support for particular degree programs. If you remember, I mentioned we'd be looking at different reasons. We just spoke about universities. This is for specific courses, courses called allied healthcare degrees. So courses such as nursing, so mental health nursing, adult nursing, child nursing, midwifery, also courses like radiography, physiotherapy, podiatry, nutrition, paramedic sciences, quite a big list, are often eligible for the NHS Learning Support Fund. And what they actually provide is a training grant, as they call it, which is essentially an extra £5,000 per year of your studies that you can get that you don't have to pay back. As long as you're doing the right course and you're eligible, you'll get the full amount of £5,000 per year, and that's on top of whatever else you're eligible for, just to say that. There's additional support if you're a parent as well, so you can get an extra £2,000 for being a parent with at least one dependent child, under 15 or under 17 if registered with special educational needs. So that's on top of that. So for parents, that could be £7,000 they get on top of their student loan, and any money from the university, any money that you could get from the parental learning allowance or the disabled students allowance or the child that's gone out of my head then the adults dependents allowance. So on top of all of those things, this would be there's additional financial support if you're traveling really far away as well for your placements in the guise of an expenses allowance as well. There's a lot of additional financial support here. And I think, Paul, we find that actually students who are studying those courses which are eligible, and I would urge anybody who thinks they may be doing a course which is eligible to familiarise themselves with the information on the Learn Support Fund's website to confirm it. But, we do find that people who are eligible are often, do well financially while they're studying, would you say, Paul?
Yeah, well, when we talk a little bit further on around household income and what's counted but for household income, yeah, we find certain students that they're quite surprised. I think that there's maybe this myth of students just existing on beans, cold beans, and just not. I'm not suggesting that all students are financially well off. I think what I'm saying is that even without this NHS Learning Support Fund, we find some students are surprised at what they might be entitled to, but particularly those students that are doing those NHS courses. I think that they're doubly surprised in a lot of cases. We find that some students are indeed a little bit better off than they were before they were a student as well. So yeah, definitely be looking up the NHS Learning Support Fund, and that idea of where I was saying before, you apply for everything in one go, your tuition fee, your maintenance loan. Actually, this is the only thing that you do need to apply for this separately. So get that applied for if you're doing one of those courses. But yeah, man, we're talking thousands of pounds here. It's you won't be forgetting to apply for that, shall we say?
No, certainly not. But as Paul said, it is a separate application because it's administered by the NHS. So just forget that, put a note in your calendar or something like that to make sure that you do apply for that, particularly if you're looking at applying maybe and starting a course in September 2025 onwards. But as I said, we'll also be doing sessions closer to that date as well, and if there are any changes to the Learning Support Fund, how it looks, what you get, we will talk about that as well. They have a lot of information on their websites, and I would really recommend just having a good look through the website. It's got a list of all the courses which are eligible. It's got some extra money that you might be able to get depending on where you're studying and the course you're studying as well. So lots of information and good information on there. So we're going to go over for the next few minutes or so a bit of information about eligibility. We've covered the money that you can get, and we're going to cover eligibility for student finance. So for your tuition fee loan and your living cost loan, which we spoke about earlier. So the big question that often people ask is, how long can I get funding for, and how much can I get? And I think that's a question, understandably, particularly the second one, that people will often have, and they want to know a figure of what they're going to get so they can plan, which makes total sense. But just to start with the first one, I guess, how long can you get funding for? And you can see in brackets it says for full time. So for full time courses, you can study for the normal duration of your course, plus an additional year called a gift year for false starts or repeat years. Now, when we talk about the normal duration of a course, often people think we mean 3 years for a full-time course, but actually it can be longer. It could include a foundation year. That's where you do a course, which is like a preparatory course, which gets you ready for your degree program. But it could also include going away for a year to study in a different country for a year abroad. It could include a work placement year, sometimes called a sandwich year. It could be a course that has a master's degree at the end integrated into it. So you finish your degree and you go straight onto a master's, which has already been arranged. As you can imagine, that may mean that your studies go on for 4 years, maybe 5 years. You'll still get funding for the duration of that, and you still get that gift year as well. So if things don't quite go to plan, Student Finance will ring fence an additional year of funding for you. The reason we mention this as well is because it doesn't negatively impact what money you can get. So any opportunity that you get to do any of these kind of things, if you want to, don't be concerned about the financial implications, because it won't negatively impact what you can get for your future studies. And how much will you get as well is a question that often people have. And the answer is, as I'm sure you can kind of tell already, and you know what I'm going to say, everybody's going to be different, and there's no one size fits all model. And we would really encourage you to apply as soon as possible. Paul, there is a calculator, isn't there, which maybe people could have a look at if they're looking in future years, but we always kind of say to with a little bit of caution when you're using the calculator. It's not exact.
Yeah, there is. I mean, I've used the calculator myself. I mean, it gives very crude headline information. I've never personally found it. I, I'd rather know what I'm going to get. I don't want to when it's how will I pay my bills, and I don't want to leave it on a little bit of guesswork off a calculator that models some things. It's useful to give some kind of a steer. But let's get the application in and let's get black and white in writing. This is how much you are going to get. Then I'm starting to budget and plan, and it's good to give a rough estimate, but it isn't any substitute for actually just getting the application in personally.
And the next things we're going to look at is eligibility for student finance. So particularly here, we'll look at your eligibility to apply for student finance, and then also the living cost loan, and who can get the living cost loan, and what criteria do they look at to determine how much you get. So you can apply for student finance for a part-time course or a full-time course as long as you meet the following three criterias: immigration status, residency status, and previous study. So immigration status, if you're a UK national, UK passport holder, or have indefinite leave to remain, that will meet that criteria for student finance. Now, there are other criteria which may be able to be taken into consideration as well. Things like EU settled status, also things such as refugee status, humanitarian protection, for example. I would advise anybody who is unsure about that or to get in contact with us, and we can have a look into it further for you. The next thing you have to meet, as well as meeting that immigration status, is having been in the UK for 3 years before you start your course. So 3 years immediately before you start your program. If you were starting this year, September 20, that would be September 2024. The only exception to that really is for refugee status, where that 3 years doesn't generally have to be met. And also previous study as well. So if you've been to university before, any previous study is generally deducted from how long you can get funding for in the future. There's some exceptions to that, and Paul, you might want to kind of mention something here. There's one around healthcare degrees. If you want to go to be a nurse, midwife, or one of those courses which is eligible for the Learning Support Fund, and you've got a degree already, it doesn't matter. They said that we need professionals in that area, so we're willing to give them full funding for a second degree. It becomes a problem, however, if you've got a degree already and you want to go study English, for example. Unfortunately you wouldn't be able to do that, or at least you'd have to find the fees yourself. You wouldn't be able to gain them from Student Finance England. And it can be a bit of an issue sometimes if people have previous years of study. I would always suggest anybody who's unsure about that to speak with us. You can also speak to Student Finance England directly as well, and they can always advise. But part-time is works a little bit different, doesn't it, Paul?
Yeah, there's just a little bit of wiggle. I mean, that broad rule applies if I already have a degree. I can't do a second one unless it's one of those NHS. So even if it was like, well, I did an English degree full time, but now can I do a history degree part time? Oh, you've already done a degree. There's just a little bit more wiggle room, I think, if people are wanting to study part-time, but maybe years ago they did a year or so at university, but it didn't quite pan out, or they maybe have a lower level higher education qualification, I don't know, a certificate of higher education. It, there's just a tiny little bit more wiggle room with part-time. But I think regardless, I think what people do is they tell themselves all of the reasons they can't go to university. And one of the things that they tell themselves, well, I can't go to university because 10 years ago I did X, Y, and Z, and that's ruled me out forever. Now, that might be true, but it stops them from even having the conversation. And I liked what you said there, John, around, look, just let's have a chat. Let's
Yeah.
have a look. We might be bringing bad news, saying, oh, it doesn't look like you can, but a lot of the time we're finding that wiggle room and finding routes and ways and pathways. Don't tell yourself you can't because you've done it before. Let's start the conversation.
And I think it's worth saying as well that here at the Lifelong Learning Centre, we often, work, with learners who have previously been to university before, or have previously studied in a different country, or maybe have got little bits here and there, and actually, it's not uncommon, is it, Paul, for us to be kind of unpicking those questions. And as you said, it's not necessarily always, the answers can vary, but don't feel like that has to be the end of the road without speaking to somebody who can look into it in detail for you and advise. As I said, we're happy to help, and we have an advice and guidance service as well. And Denise and Mohammed are great at kind of unpicking all those questions as well, and we'll speak about that a little bit at the end. So the last thing to say, well, not the last thing to say, but one of the last things is really to cover in detail about the maintenance loan. So if you catch time back to when we started, I said you get from Student Finance England, you get a tuition fee loan and you get a maintenance loan or a living cost loan. Your tuition fee loan, as long as you meet the criteria that we've previously covered, you'll get your tuition fee loan for the duration of your studies. And you will also get a minimum maintenance loan. But to get above the minimum maintenance loan up to the maximum entitlement that you're eligible for, you need to provide evidence of your household income. And this is if you are studying for a part-time course as well as a full-time course, as long as the part-time course is eligible for a maintenance loan. And the key factors that student finance are interested in is how old you are when you're going to be studying. And the age they're interested in is 25. So if you're under 25, it's your parents' income, which is used to determine your house, used to be classed as your household income to determine how much you get in your maintenance loan, irrespective of whether you live with them or not. And if you're over 25, it's a partner, spouse, civil partner's earnings, who you live with, which is used to determine how much you get in your maintenance loan. So if you're over 25, as I said, it's a partner, spouse, civil partner who you live with. So if you're over 25 and you don't live with a partner, spouse, or civil partner, then you will be looking at the top end of your maintenance loan, the maximum, because that's the only earnings for anybody over 25 that they're interested in, not your own and not anybody else you may live with. So your own earnings, irrespective if you're under 25 or over 25, is always going to be zero, nil, for the purposes of student finance. And that's because they're looking at you as a student, essentially. And if you live with children, it can be young children, grown-up children, grandparents, friends, cousins, family members, flatmates, whoever it is, their earnings are not taken into consideration either. It's literally just a partner, spouse, civil partner. If you're over 25 and if you're under 25, it's a parent's income. And if you remember, I said irrespective of whether you live with them or not as well, it's still your parent's income if you're under 25. There are some exceptions to that. So if you're married and you're under 25, if you're divorced, if you have children of your own, if you've been financially independent from your parents for 3 years, and you can prove it as well, or if you've been estranged from your parents, and usually that's something that has to be evidenced by the local authorities, something extremely serious, then you'll be pushed into that over 25 category. But everybody else who's under 25, it's a parent's income. I think people often get this part quite kind of confused, would you say, Paul? But it is really as clear as under 25 parents' income, over 25 partners' income, who you live with.
That, I mean, they talk about, well, I live with my brother, my sister, I've got 3 kids, it's just that. I mean, and you've mentioned underneath on the slide there, John, that thing around if you're over the age of 59, that well, if you're a full-time student, you'll get a reduced maintenance loan. You won't get as much as a student that's under 59. I think for part-time students, if you're over the age of 59, you don't qualify for a maintenance loan at all of a year. But yeah, I think people do overcomplicate it. It's just that. Now that does kind of make people think, as you say, well, if I'm under 25, it seems a little bit unfair that my parents' income is going to be taken into account because I don't live with them and I haven't lived with them. And yeah, there is the rules, isn't there, where they can look at that a little bit differently. But yeah.
And also applying as early as possible. As soon as applications open, if you're applying in future years, and if you're listening to this and starting in September 2024, I would suggest you do it ASAP. But applying as early as you can gives you the opportunity and the time, if you are applying maybe somebody under 25 who's, maybe estranged from their parents or is financially independent, to provide that information, whatever information it is that student finance will need. So applying as early as possible gives you the best possibility of getting everything in place correctly for you when you start your course. Again, I understand if anybody want to chat about this, we're welcome. We welcome you to have a chat with us about it, because certain circumstances can perhaps be a little bit more complicated, but as a general rule, under 25 parents' income, over 25 partner, spouse, civil partner's income, who you live with, and that who you live with is a crucial part as well. So yeah, just really briefly, just to run over, if you have dependents, as we mentioned, you can get additional support. If you have a disability, this is a disabled students allowance for study costs only. If you think you're eligible for either of them, apply, and then you will find out what you're eligible for. Spoke in detail about who is your household, what is classed as your household income, what income will be counted as well. I guess just to cover that as well, that when you are, we'll then ask some, for that information from whoever you put down, whether it be a parent or a partner as well. And also where you live as well is a factor. So if you live in the parental home while you're studying, you will get slightly less than somebody who is living away from the parental home while they're studying. And if anybody's thinking about moving to London for a university, as long as the university is located in London, you will get an extra £3,000+ per year for your studies. Just to mention as well, while you're actually at university as well, there's a lot of support that you can access, and it's designed to help you during your studies as well. So it's just worth knowing about it before you even start sometimes. So Paul mentioned that, and I'm sure he can speak about this, but he's a student support officer, and they can offer, individual one-to-one support. And it doesn't necessarily just have to be about your course. It can be about other things that are going on in your life as well, which of course are going to impact and affect sometimes your studies. Um, so that can be signposting about, financial support, including to university hardship funds. Paul, would you say most universities have hardship funds? Almost all, nearly, I would say.
Yeah, listen,
Yeah,
I think the key message here is that um, just ask for help. Um,
yeah.
I think students at university maybe make two mistakes. They think that the university couldn't help with something, so they don't particularly ask, or they think that they might be just causing trouble or look bad if they ask for help or say that they're struggling, and both couldn't be further from the truth. Universities are big, complex beasts. We're almost a community. We have, well, here at University of Leeds, we've got about 40,000 people. A lot of them come and live on campus, and they're spending years with us. And we function much like a community, and we're here to support each other. And we know that there'll be bumps along the way and things that kind of happen. And generally, anything that a student could come to us and ask us for help about, financial or non-financial, we've got experts in house who can help and advise and support. And sometimes that might be signposting you to the right places where you can get help and support. Or sometimes, like you said, it's directly being able to help. Most universities have hardship funds where they can help where there's significant financial crisis. So separately to this session about student finance, I think just imparting this message of whatever you struggle with come September, whether it's academic skills, medical stuff, finance, just ask someone for help and they'll be happy to help and probably can help.
No, definitely. I think it's just don't struggle alone. Reach out when you're at university. There is the support available, as Paul said. Part-time study, I feel like we've really covered this, Paul. Would you say a lot of this? But I think just kind of key things are just, the
Yeah.
part-time courses are still eligible for student finance. There are some which are not eligible for the living cost loan, the maintenance loan. They're called foundation degrees, not to be confused with foundation years, which are very different. But a foundation degree is often not eligible for a maintenance loan. Here at the Lifelong Learning Centre, all of our part-time courses would be eligible for a maintenance loan for the part-time degree programs. But if you do encounter a foundation degree, yeah, just double check. Um, as we said, you still get bursaries for disability support, but not childcare or the adult dependence grant. We covered that as well. And applications, just get your application in as early as possible, particularly if maybe there's more complex circumstances or maybe you need to provide particular evidence as well. But basically, the messages are really the same, aren't they, Paul? I would say.
Yeah, and as we're going there, um, with full-time students, one of the questions we get often asked, and forgive me that this might be on the next slide or two, but it may not be for good reason. We get asked questions about benefits, and we're not benefits advisors. We know quite a lot about student finance. And we know some stuff around benefits, but we're not here to provide benefits advice. Now, very crudely speaking, when a student becomes a full-time student, if they're in receipt of things like universal credit, they would stop being in receipt of universal credit and move on to student finance, um, broadly speaking. But with part-time students, there is an interplay where we might have some students that are only studying with us a couple of hours a week and are still in receipt of universal credit. And that thing of kind of applying early for their student finance is important because it needs to then kind of work with their benefits, but also saying to part-time students as well who are in receipt of benefits, just to make sure that they're getting that specialist benefits advice as well. Many, if not all, of our part-time students who are in receipt of benefits, they don't particularly find themselves any worse off. Things kind of balance out. But I would be encouraging students to apply for student finance so you know how much you're going to get from student finance, which then lets you take it, that information to somewhere like Welfare Rights. Leeds City Council have an organisation called Welfare Rights, who are impartial benefits advisors, and they can look at how much student finance have said they're going to give you, and then calculate how that might impact on benefits. Whether, like I say, most of the times it balances out. If people don't live in Leeds, the Citizens Advice Bureau can probably do the same thing as well. But that's the other thing that maybe jumped out to me for all students, I suppose, in receipt of benefits, particularly part-time students, where I think that that's probably going to be more likely that they're going to be studying whilst still in receipt of universal credit and housing benefit and things like that.
Yeah, totally agree as well. Totally agree. Um, so student finance is open for applications if you are wanting to study September 2024 for the 2024-2025 academic year. So get your application in as soon as you can if that's the case. And if you are thinking of starting 2025 or 2026, for example, it generally opens in the early spring of that year. Just remember that you don't have to have an application done and completed. You don't need an offer at university to apply for student finance. Just as soon as you can, you get your application in. If you don't go to university, you simply don't get the money. And you apply every year as well. It's something we've not mentioned, but you do apply every year of your studies. You reapply, should I say, for student finance. So if your circumstances change, the amount you could get in your living cost loan could change as well. So for example, if somebody's 24 when they start university, and they're 25 in the second year, then potentially that could have an impact. We spoke about the student finance calculator. Have a look at it, have a play around with it, but remember, it's not going to give you that exact result. It's just a kind of, or exact amount. It's going to give you a kind of a broad idea of what you might get. And have a research of all the different loans and grants that you might be able to get, or sorry, grants and bursaries that you may be able to get from different universities as well. I mentioned that we have an advice and guidance service here at the Lifelong Learning Centre. This is something that we run all year round, so it's not kind of restricted to term time, and it's something that just we'll be continuing hopefully for the foreseeable. It's an opportunity to sit down with either Mohammed or Denise and have a conversation with them about what you could study at university and planning a pathway to get there as well. So it's free. Crucially, it's impartial as well. So it's not about getting you to Leeds or the Lifelong Learning Centre. It's about you finding out what your options are. And it's a one-to-one appointment, whether that be over Teams on the internet, whether that be over the phone, or whether that be face-to-face in our office. They can help with lots of things. So it can be applications, it can be qualification queries, it can be that you want to study something and you don't know what it is, but you just feel it's the time for you to do something. And it can be unpicking that and working out what that might be and how to get there. It could be that you've got a particular professional job that you desperately want to get to, or degree you want to study, and how do I get there? And they can help you with that as well. So their contact details are on the bottom there, so either email address or telephone number. But it's particularly, for adults who haven't had the opportunity to go to university and get a degree level qualification, or overseas equivalent. So do use it if you think it will be useful for you. Paul mentioned some of the links that we offer, and I understand that you can't just click on it in a video, unfortunately. But a lot of these, if you just type them into Google, they will be the first thing that comes up. So Welfare Rights is in Leeds, as Paul said. It's a welfare advice service which is confidential and free, which the council run. So if you live in Leeds, that's one to have a chat with about particular benefits questions and how they interact with student finance. If you live further afield and maybe they don't have a local authority welfare advice service, always worth checking if they do. But if they don't, your local authority, maybe Citizens Advice is a good option as well. The Scholarship Hub is a website that has lots of different options for grants and bursaries, sometimes ones which aren't linked to universities, trusts, organisations, funds, which often offer small pots of money. Have a look at that. Turn to Us is very similar. And the Leeds University bursary is one we spoke about, which is Leeds specific, which could be up to about £3,000 per year for full-time students, pro rata for part-time students. But part-time students are eligible for it as well, just to say. And then these links as well are worth looking at. We'll see if there's any way we can put them in the comments in the description below, so you can click on them because they're a bit longer. But this is detailed information about full-time students and benefits and which benefits are impacted, and part-time students and benefits and which benefits are impacted. Worth having a read of if you've got any questions about that. And that is it for us, I believe, Paul. And just kind of, I guess, for us just to say thank you very much for listening. If you do have questions, as it says on the screen now, I would say get in contact with us at lifelonglearning@leeds.ac.uk, and we can always, sit down with you or have a chat over the phone and kind of go over that in a bit more detail. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Bye.